Hello, welcome to Julia Danmeri from TranslateAble. How are you this afternoon?
Hello, I'm amazing. Thanks, Dan. How are you? Thanks.
I'm good. It's very good to see you after probably a couple of years of us working together at Closer Still Media. So who would have thought it? I'm interviewing you for your new business.
No, I know. Exciting.
How things change. So we're going to get into all of that. We're going to talk about obviously the business, TranslateAble, what it means and what it does and who for. And we're going to talk about your journey getting there. But to start off with, Julia, on these programs, it's always good to get a sense of who's in front of me, who's the guest. So bring yourself to life for those that aren't aware of who Julia is, sort of your background, how you got into events, that sort of thing.
Okay, so basically I've been working in events for almost 20 years, and I got into the event industry by complete and utter accident. So I graduated from uni. I lived in the Dominican Republic for about a year, thought I'd better come back and get a serious job. So I sent my CV off to like a million of my agencies and got a job at EMAP, which is now Hive, and basically stayed in events ever since. So that was almost 20 years ago, basically. Yep. So I worked there, worked in Informa, then moved on to Closer Still, where I was operations director and built the ops team from scratch. And then now I'm here, TranslateAble. That's a really brief journey of almost 20 years.
Yeah, you really.
But we haven't got much time.
You really summarised 20 years. And we were just discussing, when you say you're here, you're now not in the UK. I think you said you were, how did you describe yourself before?
Digital nomad.
A digital nomad.
Yeah, So basically, we're traveling while we're working.
Right.
That's dream. Well, just because my business, all my freelancers work globally, it kind of makes sense, really.
Absolutely. So it's interesting because you went to Portsmouth University, is that right? From my limited research. And I went to Manchester and I did a history degree. I don't know what degree you did. What degree did you do in Portsmouth?
Languages, Dan, of course. I did.
So there you go. So it's interesting. So it's sort of come full circle. So there's a lesson that not that I've become an historian, and that might be eventually, but actually, so it's something you've ended up doing something that I guess you've always had a passion for. So people fall into events; they don't necessarily choose it. It looks like that was your sort of career journey as well on the path. But lots of people, you were actually the first person, probably my bad, that I've spoken to that's had a career, or one of the few people, should I say, that had a career in ops rather than maybe sales or marketing or content. Why operations? Actually, define operations for us, for those that aren't aware.
Someone who kind of maybe isn't from the event industry who needs to know what operations is. We're basically the people that all make the things happen. So you have sales who send the exhibitors, marketing who kind of bring the visitors, just to kind of really summarize it. And operations just make sure that everything's there. Everything that's been promised is on site.
So you did languages at university. You went into events, and talk to me then about the journey of getting to where you are now, running this business, which we're going to talk the actual specifics about in a second. Did you always have a burning desire, not necessarily to set the actual business up, which you've done now, all the services that you provide, but to do something around languages? Just talk us about, when this sort of seed of an idea came about.
So it was actually during COVID. I mean, I have always loved languages. Well, I grew up speaking Russian and English at home. So it kind of all started from a very young age. And I've always kind of maintained my languages, be it in like school, university. And then also kind of when I started working at Closer Still, I was really lucky in that they launched one of their first international events in France. And where I kind of hadn't used my languages professionally ever, really, I thought that would be a really good opportunity to brush up on my languages. So I started kind of doing language lessons, started running the events in French. And then that kind of just continued throughout my time at Closer Still.
Yeah.
So basically that love of languages has always been there. And then, so the whole idea for TranslateAble kind of came about during COVID. So I think like everybody else, I had like a little sleep for the first 2 weeks. And then after that, just thought, what do I do now? Yeah. So I started a master's in translation to keep myself entertained. And it just kind of came from there. And kind of during my time in operations anyway, it was always so hard to find operations resource with languages as well. So I've just kind of combined the two, combined events and languages, and here I am.
So Yeah, Julia. So the ignorant amongst us, maybe myself, might think, okay, we're at an event. We're in a major city. Let's take Paris. Surely everyone's going to speak English. So why the need, for someone to help on site that speaks different languages? Or am I wrong?
Yes, you are wrong. No, I feel like we take that for granted a little bit, that everybody does speak English. And I feel like, yes, you can request your venue contact, supplier contact for an English-speaking contact. But not everybody is going to speak English, or to a level that you need them to, especially in operations, like with all the detail we go into. You need everyone to be able to understand exactly what you've just said. Sure. But also kind of in ops, we work with not just the venue contact, there's also electricians, the guys that lay out the furniture. And you need to be able to communicate with them. So I kind of feel like you'll get your job done faster if you can speak the same language as them, rather than going through the only person that speaks English. And also, I feel like it's good to show that you're making an effort.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, when I was looking to do sales into France, whether they spoke English or not, they didn't really want to do it. They wanted to talk in their mother tongue, right? So, and that is their different to Germany. I found, for example, the Germans are quite happy to speak English. I quite enjoyed it, a bit novel. Did you find that as well? Different people, whether they could speak English or not, wanted to speak in their own language.
I think, people do want to speak in their own language. Yeah, they can explain themselves better, I suppose. But I've got to say, kind of, depending on which language you speak, I've noticed that particularly with French people really notice if you make the effort in the language. That's probably the language I speak that I get the most feedback.
Sure. Okay, so you can speak languages. You obviously had a senior position in a trade show business. You then did this degree in translation studies, which followed on from your master's, and you had a university degree, highly intelligent, shall we say, in this field. But that doesn't always mean, okay, I'm going to set up a business, right? And I'm going to make it work. What sort of research did you do? Why did you think there was an opportunity, a gap in the market? What made you think, actually, this is a business?
So actually, what I was planning on starting is actually different to what I'm running now. So my initial intention was to be a translator myself, to offer project management services myself with the languages that I spoke, because that's what I intended to do. And kind of the reason for it was, as I mentioned earlier, whenever I was looking for ops people with languages, I could never find them. It was quite difficult. You had to compromise on something. So that was my original intention. So when I started kind of talking to people about it, I then found that all the work that I was getting was all the languages I didn't speak. So that is where TranslateAble then turned into a language agency with all these different services, because that's what people started coming to me with, asking if I could help. Of course, I can help.
Okay. So talk us through the business. Talk us through the services that you currently offer to start off with, please.
There's translation. There's also interpreting as well, subtitling, live captioning, and transcription. So that's
okay. And let's sort of dive into those a bit more. I want to focus on interpreting and translation just for a minute. Just bring those services to life for me, please.
Okay, so interpreting is basically when you need somebody to transfer your message live. So it could be in a meeting, it could be in a conference. You've got a speaker who speaks English, but your audience is French. It could be anything. So it doesn't have to be like a massive kind of wide scale audience. It could just be a one-on-one meeting that you need somebody to interpret as well.
Sure. And it could be, for example, keynote speaker in a theatre in a country that's got an international audience, and they want to make sure that the audience that they've got there, that can benefit as much as possible. So that obviously just goes through the headset on stage or in a meeting room. Okay. And in terms of translation?
So the translation side of things, basically people have like kind of documents. So you can have things like websites, you've got marketing materials, sponsorship brochures, exhibitor manuals. So once you kind of like launch in another country, you obviously need to kind of cater for the languages your exhibitor speaks, so they understand the message you're trying to convey. Yeah. So that's where we would then come in. We would take your documents and transfer them into the language that you need. And again, every time we'd be using kind of specialists in that particular area. So for example, if you've got a website to be translated, we'll have somebody who specialises in translating websites. Sure. Or if it's a contract, we'll have kind of a legal translator who would then do that for you.
Sure. And it's interesting, obviously you've got a background in events, because if I think about the exhibitor manuals that I used to look at, they were hard enough to sort of understand in English, like as an English speaker. So actually, yeah, it makes sense that you'll need a specialist to sort of translate the subtleties and the nuances of, putting a stand together, or the electrics that's required, or the health and safety.
Yeah, exactly. I can't imagine kind of like trying to read a manual in your second language. You just wouldn't bother reading it at all. Yeah. So yeah, having something in your language would definitely be helpful.
Yeah. And I think I also read on your website the word localization.
Yeah.
Just what do you mean by that? I think within the sort of translation service that you offer, is that just?
So it's basically just making whatever material it is appropriate for the region that you're taking it to. Sure. I'm trying to think of an example for you. So even kind of if you've got a website that's in English, but UK English, to take the same website into the US, you'd need to change some of the words to make it appropriate to the US. Yes, somebody American could understand it and you could just leave it. But actually, to make it sound more appropriate to localize it, you'd need to amend some of the text to make it.
Yeah, and it makes sense, because also this is going to be seen by exhibitors, right? Potentially, right, depending on the event. So they're gonna, if they've paid money, they're going to expect it to, to be easy to understand as well. So that's going to reflect poorly on the organizer if it's not done properly.
Yeah, exactly. Everything kind of like that is a representation of you. Again, another reason why I think you should get somebody professional to do these sorts of translations, not just kind of your mum or your mate the language, just because it is a representation of you. Like as an example, I saw something recently, it was an advert in a magazine, which had obviously been translated into English, but it didn't flow correctly. So you could tell it was just badly translated. I just thought it's just a massive waste of money and a wasted opportunity as well. Like why not just do it properly?
And if you're an interpreter, I guess, maybe I've got this wrong, that it's more than just being able to speak the language, right? And translate. So that's why they need to, I guess, use someone you would have vetted these individuals. Talk to me about the difference between just being able to translate something and actually interpretation for the audience is listening.
Yeah, interpreting is really, really intense. I think that's the thing again with languages. I think kind of unless you've either worked as a translator or an interpreter or perhaps recruited one, it's really easy just to think like, oh, someone else can speak two languages, they can do the job, but they can't. Exactly. It takes a lot, especially kind of doing my master's in translation. I really found that there's a lot of work that goes into kind of translating, like research and language knowledge on both sides as well. But interpreting, it is really intense. You can only kind of do it for a certain time period before needing a break. And you have to be a specialist in your field as well. So kind of you can't have a person who speaks French and English interpreting, I don't know, a cookery show and also a medical conference. They've got to be specialists in the thing that they're talking about, so they know exactly what's being said. Yeah.
Well, tell us about live captioning as well. Just trying to understand the use cases. I guess, is that more a virtual event, or is it to make it more accessible for people that maybe, have got an impairment or a disability? How does that work?
Yeah, so live captioning, I found that that's being asked for quite a lot at the moment, and that is more kind of for inclusivity. So that's kind of what I've been asked for live captioning about quite a lot. And subtitling, kind of the same, really, again, to try and make events more inclusive. Like an example of where I've subtitled recently, one of the agencies I was working with was building a virtual event platform for one of their clients. And their speakers were all, I think, English speaking, and they wanted subtitles in a different language. So we created the subtitles for them. Right. So it's a case of kind of having a bigger audience that speaks French, Spanish, and Mandarin. That's what it was at the time, rather than just the English speakers, and also to try and make it more inclusive.
And do you think this is a sort of a new thing that organisers are wanting? i.e. because they recognise it's a benefit to be more inclusive because it brings more people to the event, or has this always been around and you're just sort of trying to get a chunk of an existing market?
I do think it is a recent thing. So kind of obviously, like I was mentioned before, I've been organising events for almost 20 years. And although live captioning's been around, it's never been something that's really been requested.
Sure.
Whereas now people really are asking for it a lot more. So I do think it's a new thing. And I think it is down to people wanting to be more inclusive, which is a good thing.
Yeah. And also I guess the explosion of the use of virtual for events as well. You know, and even though we've gone back to live, lots of, you know, corporate companies, I guess, are still doing their own internal meetings or sales kickoffs or international meetings online still, right? So that still created the need for this sort of service. Well, tell us about the types of clients that you're working with and you will be working with.
All sorts. So event agency, basically anybody in events really. So it can be event agencies. So I find event agencies need kind of somebody who can provide a multitude of services. So they've got like one contact that can do subtitles, live captions, translations, interpreters, like all of that. And rather than having to go to different suppliers. So yeah, agencies, any exhibition organisers that operate internationally, suppliers that operate internationally, basically anyone in events.
And I'm assuming there are people that do this stuff already.
Yes.
Which is good because it means there's a demand for it. How do you think you differ from other people in this space?
So there's no one that focuses on the event industry. So again, something that I found when I worked in operations was that we'd get documents translated and we'd get them back, but a lot of it didn't really make proper sense because nobody knows the language of events, like shell scheme, space only. That makes sense to no one apart from us, really. So you need to kind of know the industry to know how to word things properly. So that's kind of one thing that I found. But then also because the event industry is so fast-paced as well, I feel like basically I want to kind of cater to that, to make sure I'm not like a 9 till 5, bye, you won't see me over the weekend.
Sure.
I know for events on Saturday. I want to make sure that I'm available and kind of flexible with the event industry is what people need when events run all days of the week.
In terms of if, you know, companies think, well, as you said before, you know, I can do this in-house. Pierre in marketing can help us on site. Just chose the most stereotypical name I could think of, but I guess that happens, right? It's like, oh, you know, we've got a French speaker, we've got a French team, they can double up as doing this on site or virtually. What would you say are the drawbacks of doing that?
So I'd say, basically I did research on this as part of my dissertation for my master's.
Yeah.
And actually that's what a lot of event companies do. But I feel like it basically is a draw on those people's time. So if you're there to do a job, someone then asks you to, I don't know, translate a document, that's a put on your time that you shouldn't be doing. So kind of you could outsource that to a translation agency, probably pay more than you would pay less than you would for that person's time that's meant to be selling, for example. So that's one thing, time. And the second thing is, like I mentioned before, I don't think anyone fully appreciates how much effort goes into all these different language services. Like I mentioned, translation, the amount of like research that you have to do to make sure that everything sounds right, and how much kind of like restructuring of sentences you need to do to make sure everything sounds smooth, which somebody kind of sitting on a desk next to you that's had something chucked on their desk to sort out when it's not part of their job probably wouldn't take the time to do because it's not their job, and also probably take them longer than it would a trained translator.
So you've started a new business. How's it going generally? What are the exciting bits of it, and what may be the things that you didn't realise? If someone's listening and has got an idea and sort of sitting on the fence, what's your advice?
I love it. It's all of it's exciting to me, if I'm quite honest. So what advice would I give? I would say, so one of my kind of favourite things that I've done, most useful things I should say that I've done is get mentors in lots of kind of different areas. So just because it makes kind of things quicker, you could sit there doing all the reading, all the research, but actually if you've got a mentor that can take in 5 minutes, then why not use that? So that's one thing.
Yeah. What about motivating yourself on a daily basis? Because you're, I guess, yes, you work with other people when the projects are on, but it's you. You're in the driving seat every day now, right? So you haven't got, and also you're working remotely. You haven't got a team. You're not going into an office 9 to 5 or whenever it was. How do you? Does the motivation just come because it's your thing? How?
I think that's what it is. Also, just because where I've recently started, there is just so much that you can be doing, and kind of I've never found like motivation particularly hard anyway. But I kind of feel more motivated because it is mine, and whatever happens kind of is in my control. So it's in my interests to work hard, really. But I feel like kind of structuring my days and knowing what I'm trying to achieve every day helps.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So because I guess the workload is just infinite, right? So you've got to make sure that you work out what you need to do, the most important things in the time period, and how I'm going to get them done.
Yeah, that's it. Actually, the other bit of advice I probably would give to people is to maybe, how do I word this? I don't want to say maybe not pay attention more, but basically everyone's got like their job that they do, and obviously that's your focus. You're paid to do it. Great. But kind of starting my own business, I really wish I kind of paid more attention to sales and actually what you guys did and like your structures and things that you'd followed as well. Because I think that probably would have helped me more. Now.
Yeah, but I guess one of the benefits of starting a business like you've done is that you're forced outside your comfort zone to do things that you don't feel comfortable with, but actually you push through them, right? You push through the fear. And actually find that it's not, it's not as bad as you thought it would be. In terms of that, what are your sort of plans for growth? Where do you hope to? This is the $1 million question. Where do you hope to be in 3 years? What's the vision for the business?
So obviously, I'd like people to know that I'm here, just because I'm kind of the only agency that caters to the event industry. It's just making sure people know that I'm here, but not just kind of people in the UK, people in France, Spain, kind of internationally as well. So it's just letting people know that I'm here.
If people want to reach you, what's the best way of doing that?
So you can email me at julia@translateable.com, or just have a look at my website, and I've got lots of different ways to reach me on there, be it LinkedIn or Instagram.
Perfect. So Julia Danmeri, thank you so much from TranslateAble. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.